Screwed up. It's all right. All right, guys, thanks very much for coming by. My name is David, and we talk about all things finance, economy, because it's going to really be affecting how your family can make it through these really, really tough times. Our goal is to help you lose less during this massive crash, and how you can make money on the way out. That's the main thing. We're going to be looking at a bunch of articles today, and I would love you if you can leave some comments below. Give me a couple questions of things that you're thinking about and strategies that you're going to be using to lose less money and to make money during the greatest buying opportunity of our lifetimes. All right, let's get into one of the first articles, you guys. So this one is from finbold.com. You can go look. The real estate experts see a big sell-off coming. How big? We're expecting at least 20% from what we can see right now. So the CPI index, or CPI, like a lot of people like to call it. The data was released on September 13th, showing inflation is running much hotter than expected. How does that affect the rest of the world? Is because whatever happens in the US happens everywhere else. As you know, I can see the US from my house, and it is the world reserve currency. We have to pay attention. For us as Canadians, everything that hits the US also comes to Canada. Canada is rich in natural resources. Almost everything that we export goes to the US. So we're neck and neck. So inflation happens, like CPI is mentioned in the United States, then Canada is going to have the same number usually. And when US raises their federal rate, 6 weeks later, Canada follows suit in the 90s, 90, 92% of the time. So we have to make sure that we're paying attention to that, because we actually have the benefit of weeks before it actually hits us. So if we continue down in this article, you guys, we're going to get to this part that's called margin calls. And so for margin calls, it says here, banks will make margin calls to investors to sell their property and reduce assets on book. What on earth does that possibly mean? Margin calls can be complicated, but it's actually not too complicated. But what it means is, imagine you had a $1.2 million house and $1 million mortgage. And because all of this craziness that is happening, your home drops from 1.2 million all the way down to 800,000. You can't legally have an $800,000 home with $1 million mortgage on it. That doesn't work anymore. So the bank may come to you and say, we are only comfortable lending you 600,000 now, or you only qualify for 600,000. In order for you to stay in your home, you have to come up with 400 grand. That does not happen. This is very, very hard. People don't have that much money just lying around. So it forces them to liquidate other things in their lives. And it could be an RV or a cottage, or it doesn't really matter what. The bank doesn't care. Just get us the money, right? That can cause some mega problems. And usually it's not one person, two people, three that are getting margin called. We're talking about huge amounts. It could be 10,000 at a time, 100,000 at a time. And that can really, really, really change the markets, especially in a market like the Toronto area, where we only ever have 5,000 homes on the market. When you have to dump tens of thousands of homes on it, it will really, really, really affect the prices. All right, you guys, let's continue on. Margin calls can be a little bit dangerous. So if we go to the next article, you can take a look at this. It's at the National Post. You can look up that article, National Post. It's called "Politicians Refuse to Stop Doing the One Thing That Makes Inflation Worse." And so we are in a massively overheated economy, obviously. And it's overheated because we have supply shortages and a lot of money. So if you look at it, it says Western politicians are mostly choosing to address the crisis using the one strategy that is guaranteed to make everything worse. Notice it's not saying Canada or the United States, Western. And it can include Japan and all of Europe and Australia. They're all doing the same thing. And in Canada, it's making reference to Canada that Prime Minister Trudeau claimed that the new billions will not contribute to increased inflation. All right. So our friend Milton Friedman, who Nobel Prize winning economist, said that money is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon. That's what I lost the word. It's always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon, meaning that as we print more money, we are going to have more inflation. It comes back down to money supply. So every economist that ever learned any economics in high school, elementary school, we learn on the first day, it's supply and demand. So when we look at the inflation today, it's easy for us to go and blame Putin, for example, because of the war that is going on there. And remember, out of the entire inflation number, which is very, very high, a portion of that is obviously because Food prices have gone up so much because Russia and Ukraine are not making it, right? And there's shortages because of it. But there's another huge chunk of inflation that is here because of how much money the governments have printed. That's the part that no government ever wants to admit to. They always would like to find some scapegoat, right? So it's not, it's one person. It's one government. It's a blend of them all, right? So everyone's got to kind of take responsibility for what they're doing. But the idea that we are printing billions of dollars in a small country like Canada and saying that it's not going to affect inflation is kind of like Disneyland. You know, that's not true. All right, guys. So let's continue on. That gives an example of how inflation happens. And this one says, by helping Chantal pay for her food or gasoline bill with a government check, you hit John with higher overall inflation and Carlos with a higher mortgage payment as the Bank of Canada responds to more aggressive rate hike cycle. So this can just be a self-fulfilling prophecy. As you print money to help one class, it creates more inflation on everybody. Then you have to print more money to help again. And it could be this inflationary cycle. Any belief, the article continues, that it will ease inflationary pressures must have studied different economic textbooks. So funny. Inflation at its core is a problem of too much money chasing too few goods. Guys, we've learned this back in school. Too much money chasing too few goods. And if we look here, in just the first 12 months of the health crisis, Ottawa took out $381 billion in new debt, the equivalent of Canada's budget for the entire Second World War. So like I said, when we look at the total inflation numbers that we have, a portion of it absolutely is because there's shortages. A huge portion of it, we don't know. It's hard to argue how big. A huge portion of it is how much money we pulled out. Imagine just in the first 12 months borrowing as much money as we spent during the Second World War. And that was just during the first 12 months. We're now 2.5 years into this, right? So we have printed insane amounts of money, which is causing all of this inflation. Okay, you guys, let's jump into the next article that I have pulled for you guys. apnews.com. You can go look at this, that in response to all of this, the government needs a lot more money, a lot more tax money. And one of their ways they're planning to do it, Treasury recommends exploring creation of digital dollar. For all you guys who are following me, we have followed a lot of these articles before, and there actually is a CBDC tracking website. So that's Central Bank Digital Currencies. And we have over 90 countries looking into this. In some ways, it's incredibly smart. Think of how it works today, where the Bank of Canada has to give it to a commercial bank, which then gives it to you. You know, there's hundreds of thousands, in some cases, millions of employees that are helping that. In this case, if we had a digital dollar, imagine no printing of paper money anymore. In Canada's case, plastic money, no creating metal coins, no people working at the mint anymore. All those jobs would be gone, right? All the commercial banks, all gonzo, because now we would all have an account with the Federal Reserve. And in many ways, the Federal Reserve have a lot of control over people. Maybe they could control a lot more people evading taxes. That's a good thing. They could also control the currency through smart contracts, also in a lot of different ways, but they could also use it in ways that could hurt you, depending on wherever your feelings are on certain matters, right? So we can look at the agendas that they're in today. And today is very popular for environmental movements, which is a really good thing. But what are they going after? They want you to burn less fuel, eat less meat, and maybe not spend as much money on certain areas, but other areas they want you to spend more on. We know that when you have a welfare check, you can't cash it in at an alcohol store, or you can't use it to go and buy lottery tickets with it. So they would be able to enforce those things really easily just with a click of a button, right? If you were a person who had some kind of criminal activity, for example, they could make it so all your money doesn't work within 10 kilometers of your home. You would never be able to buy anything, which sounds good. My always caution to something like that is it always sounds good when you hear the good things, but it's only good when you agree with the policies, right? So if you were somebody who really liked alcohol or gambling or eating meat or using gas or whatever the thing is, when that turns against you, people have a real hard time with that, right? So just think through the process. It's not always that they will do those things. It's what the power that they have. All right, so if we jump into this article again, the Treasury recommends the exploration of the digital dollar. This is nothing new. This happened a while back. The Biden administration is moving one step closer to developing a central bank digital currency known as the digital dollar, saying it will reinforce the U.S. role as a leader in the world's financial systems. This is sends shivers down my back, right? In order to save your country and make sure it's strong, you have to adopt the digital dollar. So I can already see part of the selling feature, right? How they're going to sell it. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, everyone knows her, said one of the Treasury recommendations is that the U.S. advance policy and technical work on potential central bank digital currency, or CBDC, so that the United States is prepared if the CBDC is determined to be of national interest. Another word, right? So if you're hearing these things are for the national interest for the country, you might think twice and go, yeah, you know what? Maybe we have to do it. Remember that this will no longer be using commercial banks. It'll be a direct liability on the Federal Reserve. They're the ones going to be issuing it. We do not need the commercial banks in the same way that we did before. So all of this is happening when this war on money is continuing, right? We see that China, the brokerages are slumping after they say China's brokerages slumped after the government urged them to reduce fees for businesses. We saw this already, right? So in the US, they're saying we have to do this for the sake of the country. In China, they're saying reduce all of your commissions on everything that you sell for the sake of the country, because there's this battle of currency. Earlier this week, we also saw that they were blaming any worker for going and asking for a raise, as they are the problem because they're getting more money and going and spending more money. So they are saying, don't do that for the sake of the country. To beat inflation, you can't ask for a raise. Then we saw Jerome Powell saying that it's becoming entrenched in our minds. And if it's in our minds that inflation will continue, we're causing the problem. Remember, all of these may have a portion, but the majority of it is coming from money creation and supply shock shortages. So we didn't build properly, our supply chains properly, and they printed an insane amount of money, right? But it's always easy to pass the buck. It's very political to always kick the can to somebody else, right? It's the Putin price hikes, right? He's not included in this calculation, but he's not the only problem. Also, if I find it interesting, Ray Dalio, who you guys know that I absolutely love, this guy, one of the smartest men everywhere. Ray Dalio does the math. Rates at 4.5% would sink the stocks 20%. 20%, you guys. So that's 20% from where they are today. Interesting, right? For every 1% that the interest rate is going up, we are losing 10 up to 20% on the stock market. When you raise the interest rate 1% on homes in high leverage markets, we're losing 10% of the home value for every 1% that the interest rate goes up. Same happens in the stock market. For every 1% that the interest rate goes up, it's going to be adding more and more and more stress to that stock market, because they are going to be losing 7%, 10%. Now Ray Dalio is saying it's even 20% if it goes to the fours. As you guys know, I love this guy's book, one of my favorite books of the entire year, The Changing World Order. If you have not read it, you need to watch it. And there's also an amazing YouTube video, like 13 million views, that breaks down this. You could watch it like 45 minutes. It's absolutely incredible. If you like the video, then I strongly suggest that you read the book. All right, you guys, but now we come to my last article. This is the one thing that you can actually do about it. So let's see if it actually comes up. It seems that it is a little bit angry at me. Okay, so this is what you see what I typed in Google. It says, why is it called the British pound sterling? Why is it called the British pound sterling? So the term is derived from 775 coins, were known as sterlings, used in Saxon England, 240 of them being minted for a pound of silver. If you continue a little bit below, there's a million different articles. Why is it called a British pound sterling? And it all says the exact same thing, because back then, 1 pound was worth 1 pound of silver. That makes sense, right? when you hear that, you're like, of course. Sterling silver, I think, is 92.5%. So they would say 1 pound of sterling silver is worth 1 piece of paper. So I think the British pound is the oldest currency that we have around right now. I think it's like 400 years old. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments below. But remember, this block right here is about 7 pounds of silver, 7 pounds. So all those years ago, this block here would cost about 7 pieces of paper, 7 pounds of sterling, right? Because it weighs 7 pounds. But if we actually fast forward to today, this right here would be costing you how much in pounds sterling? It would be costing you something like 2,000 pounds instead of 7. So, do you know, like this block, if it was, I wish it was ancient, but if this was made 400 years ago, if it was, this never changed over time. It's always remained the same. But what changed is they just printed more and more money. How did it go from 7 pieces of paper to 2,000 pieces of paper? 7 pounds sterling certificates to 2,000 pounds sterling. Why did it change? They printed a lot of money. That is inflation. So we have to be careful, right, always about the whole inflation thing and how that's going to come back and bite us. So we don't say put all your money into that. There's always an intrinsic value to something like this, okay? So if you look at something like this, this is a novelty coin, okay? It's not made of precious metal and solid metal. This Bitcoin coin is novelty, so it's collectible. But collectibleness could come and could go, right? This is just, the price is determined by what somebody's willing to pay for it, just because they want it. The point of silver is that it has other values to it. It's used in tons of electronics, electronic vehicles, all the batteries, connections, all the chip boards. It's used, I said solar panels. It's used in all kinds of stuff. Almost every piece of electronics that you have has some form of silver in it. And that means it has some kind of industrial use or intrinsic value. It has a value by its usage, not just by its collectible nature. Yeah. So that's something that I want you guys to think about. A lot of people that I run into, they look at a lot of collectibles these days. So I've seen where they have some type of action figure in its box, or they'll have some kind of NFT or something. It actually doesn't have a use attached to it. So their prices could be more volatile, whereas something that has an intrinsic value because of its usefulness somewhere in industrialness, then it has a different type of value attached to it. Something to remember, you guys. As you know, guys, I'm always here for your health, wealth, and happiness. I want you guys to succeed in this world and prevent a loss. If you guys are in a smaller home, the likelihood is that it's going to be better off. It's not going to sink as bad. If you're in a larger home, it probably, the price will be coming down quite a bit. Remember, the larger they are, the harder they fall. So the larger the home, the bigger the price drop. So if you were an empty nester or somebody who retired or whatever, and you're still sitting on a 4-bedroom home on a big lot, you know, that price probably will be dropping more and more, especially in a bigger city. But if you're in the smaller entry-level homes, those are the things that are generally protected. Anyway, you guys, as you know, I want you guys to continue going out, continue crushing it. I'm always here for you. If you have any questions, please leave it for me. And if you have any comments, I would love for you to leave them below. Please remember to just send this to one person that this could help. It would really mean a lot to me. And please remember to subscribe to this, leave a message, and hit that notification bell. It really means a lot. Thanks so much, guys. I'll see you in the next video.